There comes a moment in every life when the noise becomes unbearable. Not the noise outside, not the traffic, not the voices, not the opinions, the noise inside. The constant whisper that says you are behind. The quiet fear that maybe you waited too long. The invisible pressure of watching other people move while your own dreams sit locked inside your chest like prisoners begging for release. And the tragedy is not that people fail. The tragedy is that millions of people never truly begin. They wake up every morning carrying invisible chains forged from doubt, hesitation, fear, memory, and the unbearable weight of what other people might think. They live in survival mode so long that they forget they were born for creation. They become spectators in a world that rewards builders. They become imitators in a world that bows to originals. They become careful when life demanded courage, but every once in a while someone decides to break the pattern. Someone gets tired of standing at the edge of their own greatness. Someone gets sick of betraying their own potential. Someone finally looks into the mirror and realizes that the enemy was never the economy, never the critics, never the circumstances, never the bad luck, never the rejection. The enemy was the smaller version of themselves they kept protecting. And the moment that realization strikes, everything changes. Because success does not begin in the bank account, it begins in identity. The world changes the instant you stop asking, "What can I get?" and start asking, "Who must I become?" That question separates the many from the few. The many wait for permission. The few move before certainty arrives. The many negotiate with discomfort. The few understand that discomfort is the entrance fee to transformation. The many spend their lives trying to avoid failure. The few use failure like firewood. And that is why the world remembers the few. Not because they were luckier. Not because they had easier lives. Not because they were fearless. But because they trained themselves to think differently. They understood that the mind is not a mirror reflecting reality. The mind is a magnet creating it. Every empire first existed as a thought. Every invention first existed as imagination. Every revolution first existed in the mind of a person crazy enough to believe that reality could be bent by vision. Look at the skyscrapers piercing the clouds. Look at the bridges suspended over impossible distances. Look at the technology in your hands. Once upon a time, all of it was invisible. An idea, a thought, a vision. The world you live in today was built by people who refused to accept the limits of current reality. And yet most people imprison themselves inside invisible cages. They wake up and immediately rehearse weakness. They repeat limitations until limitations become identity. They feed fear every single day and wonder why courage never grows. Understand this clearly. Your mind is always listening. Every thought is instruction. Every word is programming. Every belief is a command sent into the deepest layers of your nervous system. When a person constantly says, "I can't," their mind begins searching for evidence to prove them right. When a person constantly says, "Life is against me," their perception becomes trained to notice obstacles instead of opportunities. When a person secretly believes they are unworthy of greatness, they sabotage success the moment it arrives because receiving it would violate their identity. Most people do not live according to potential. They live according to subconscious permission. That is why two people can stand in the exact same storm and walk away with completely different destinies. One person sees destruction. The other sees training. One person sees rejection. The other sees redirection. One person sees pain. The other sees power being forged under pressure. The circumstances may be identical, but the interpretation changes everything. Because life does not merely respond to your actions, life responds to the energy behind your actions. A weak mind creates weak movement. A divided spirit creates inconsistent effort. A person filled with doubt moves slowly, hesitates constantly, second guesses every decision, and eventually misses the moment entirely. But a person driven by certainty becomes dangerous, not because they know the future, but because they trust themselves enough to move through uncertainty. And that is the secret most people never learn. Confidence is not knowing everything will work. Confidence is knowing you will adapt until it does. The oak tree does not become mighty overnight. For years, it looks insignificant, fragile, easy to overlook. But beneath the surface, roots are spreading silently through darkness. Strength is being built where nobody can see it. And this is where most people quit. They quit in the invisible season. They stop because results are not immediate. They stop because applause has not arrived. They stop because the world has not validated them yet. But the few understand something extraordinary. The invisible season is where destiny is decided. Because what you repeatedly do in darkness eventually reveals itself in light. The athlete trains long before the championship. The musician practices before the stage. The visionary works while the world sleeps. The empire is built in private before it is recognized in public. And this is why discipline matters more than motivation. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is spiritual. Motivation rises and falls with mood. Discipline continues after emotion disappears. Anyone can move when they feel inspired. The few move when they are exhausted, uncertain, doubted, ignored, and afraid. That is why they win. Because life eventually rewards consistency more than intensity. A river can carve through stone not because it is violent, but because it is relentless. And your future is being carved the same way, not by one dramatic moment, not by one emotional breakthrough, but by repeated daily decisions that slowly shape identity. Every morning you either strengthen your future or weaken it. Every day you either move closer to your highest self or farther away from it. Every habit is a vote. Every action is a declaration. Every repetition becomes character, and character becomes destiny. The problem is that most people want the reward without the rebirth. They want confidence without confrontation, wealth without discipline, transformation without sacrifice, peace without inner work. But life does not work that way. Everything valuable demands evolution. The caterpillar cannot become the butterfly while remaining comfortable inside the cocoon. And maybe that is where you are right now. Inside the pressure, inside the confusion, inside the season where your old identity is dying but your new identity has not fully emerged. That space feels terrifying because you can no longer tolerate mediocrity, but greatness still feels distant. You are standing between two versions of yourself. One version is addicted to safety. The other is hungry for expansion. One version wants approval. The other wants freedom. One version says, stay small so nobody judges you. The other whispers, you were made for more. And the battle between those voices will determine your entire life. Because the greatest war is never external. It is internal. It is the war between vision and fear, purpose and distraction, discipline and indulgence, faith and doubt. Most people lose that war quietly, not in one catastrophic moment, but through slow surrender. They surrender their dreams to routine. They surrender their standards to convenience. They surrender their calling to comfort. And years later, they wonder why they feel empty. But emptiness is not random. Emptiness is what happens when the soul realizes you abandoned your own potential. There is something inside you that knows when you are playing small. You can feel it at night. You can feel it in moments of silence. You can feel it when you see someone else living boldly and something deep inside you aches because you recognize your own buried hunger. That hunger matters. Do not silence it. It is not greed. It is not arrogance. It is the echo of possibility. The lion does not apologize for wanting to hunt. The eagle does not apologize for wanting to fly higher. And you should not apologize for wanting to become extraordinary. You were not created merely to survive the week. You were not born to spend your life trapped in cycles of fear, distraction, and emotional exhaustion. There is greatness sleeping inside you that requires awakening, but awakening demands honesty. You must become honest about your excuses, honest about your habits, honest about the environments draining your spirit, honest about the people normalizing your stagnation, honest about the lies you repeat to yourself to justify remaining where you are. Because nothing changes until truth enters the room. And truth is uncomfortable. Truth reveals how often you abandon your own standards. Truth reveals how much energy you wasted seeking validation from people who were lost themselves. Truth reveals how many opportunities died because hesitation moved faster than courage. But truth is also liberation. Because once you see clearly, you can finally rebuild intentionally. You can decide that your mind will no longer be a battlefield occupied by negativity. You can decide that your body will no longer carry the weight of laziness. You can decide that your future will no longer be dictated by your past. The past is a teacher, not a prison. Too many people chain themselves to former failures as though mistakes are permanent identities. They say, I failed before. I made bad decisions. I wasted time. I lost years. But listen carefully. A broken chapter does not mean the story is over. The strongest people in history were not people who avoided collapse. They were people who learned how to rise from it. Steel becomes powerful because it survives fire. Diamonds become valuable because they endure pressure. And human beings become unstoppable because they learn how to transform pain into purpose. Some of the strongest souls on earth were built in silence after disappointment shattered them. They learned that pain can either poison you or refine you. One person experiences rejection and becomes bitter. Another experiences rejection and becomes driven. One person experiences hardship and collapses. Another experiences hardship and discovers strength they never knew existed. The difference is meaning. If you assign empowering meaning to adversity, adversity becomes fuel. And fuel changes everything. Because once a person discovers purpose, exhaustion loses power over them. Purpose creates endurance. A person without purpose needs constant motivation. A person connected to purpose becomes difficult to stop. That is why clarity matters. You cannot move powerfully through life while mentally scattered. Most people are drowning in distraction, notifications, comparison, entertainment, noise, endless opinions, constant stimulation. Their attention is fragmented, and fragmented attention creates fragmented lives. Energy flows where focus goes. If your attention constantly leaks into meaningless things, your future weakens little by little. But when a person becomes focused, something extraordinary happens. Their mind sharpens. Their decisions improve. Their energy intensifies. Their intuition deepens. Focus is power. The sun scattered across the earth creates warmth. The sun concentrated through a magnifying glass creates fire. And the same is true for the human mind. When your thoughts become aligned, disciplined, and intentional, you become a force. Not because you suddenly become perfect, but because you stop wasting yourself. The average person leaks energy everywhere. The few direct it, and direction changes destiny. A ship without direction drifts wherever the waves decide. A person without vision drifts wherever circumstances push them. That is why vision is sacred. Vision gives suffering meaning. Vision gives sacrifice purpose. Vision allows a human being to endure temporary pain because they are emotionally connected to a greater future. Without vision, discipline feels like punishment. With vision, discipline becomes devotion. You stop seeing effort as suffering. You begin seeing effort as construction. Every early morning becomes another brick. Every sacrifice becomes another beam. Every difficult decision becomes another layer of foundation beneath the future you are building. And slowly something changes inside you. You stop identifying as a victim of life. You start becoming the architect of it. You begin understanding that your thoughts are seeds. Your habits are water. Your environment is soil. And your future is the harvest. Nothing grows accidentally. Weeds grow naturally. Greatness grows intentionally. That is why the few guard their minds fiercely. They know the mind is sacred territory. They are careful what they consume, careful who they listen to, careful what energy they allow near their spirit, because energy is contagious. Spend enough time around people who complain and your ambition weakens. Spend enough time around fear and courage begins shrinking. Spend enough time around mediocrity and excellence starts feeling extreme. But spend time around visionaries and your perspective expands. Spend time around disciplined people and your standards rise. Spend time around those who refuse excuses and your own excuses begin sounding pathetic. Environment shapes identity more than most people realize. And sometimes growth requires distance. Distance from negativity. Distance from distraction. Distance from people committed to misunderstanding your evolution. Not everyone will understand your transformation. Some people only feel comfortable with the version of you they could control. The moment you become more focused, more disciplined, more ambitious, more intentional, they become uncomfortable because your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. Do not let that stop you. A tree does not ask permission to grow taller. And you cannot spend your life shrinking yourself to protect other people's comfort. The world does not reward hidden greatness. It rewards expressed greatness. So stop dimming your fire. Stop apologizing for your hunger. Stop acting small to fit into rooms you were meant to outgrow. You were not designed for a life of hesitation. You were designed for expansion. And expansion requires courage. Not once, daily. Daily courage to continue. Daily courage to believe. Daily courage to act before results appear. Daily courage to stand alone when necessary. Daily courage to trust your vision even when nobody else sees it yet. Because every extraordinary life begins as an invisible idea inside the mind of one person willing to believe before evidence arrives. That is faith. Not religious performance, not empty words. Faith is internal certainty in advance. Faith is walking while the path is still hidden. Faith is building while the outcome is uncertain. Faith is planting seeds in seasons where nothing appears to be growing. And eventually life responds to that energy. Because reality has a strange way of bending toward people who refuse to quit. Not immediately. Not magically, but inevitably, the persistent person gains advantages the quitter never sees. Momentum appears, skill compounds, connections emerge, opportunities reveal themselves, confidence strengthens, and one day people call them lucky. But what the world calls luck is often invisible persistence finally becoming visible success. But what the world calls luck is often invisible persistence finally becoming visible success. And in that moment of recognition, when results finally surface, after seasons of silence, something dangerous can happen to the mind of the unprepared. They begin to believe the reward was the goal. They begin to think the arrival was the victory. But the few understand something deeper. Arrival is never the destination. Arrival is simply proof that alignment worked. Because what you are truly building is not outcomes. You are building identity. And identity is what sustains everything you touch. That is why success built on discipline is stable, while success built on emotion collapses under pressure. Emotion creates spikes. Identity creates stability. And life will always test stability. Not once, not occasionally, but continuously, Because life is not designed to give you what you want. Life is designed to reveal what you are. And the revelation happens under resistance. That is why adversity never disappears from the path of growth. It evolves with you. At the beginning, adversity looks like confusion. Later, it looks like responsibility. Later still, it looks like pressure. And eventually, it looks like visibility. Because when you begin to rise, you are no longer hidden from the world. You become seen, and being seen is its own form of pressure. People begin to have expectations. People begin to project assumptions. People begin to measure you against standards you did not choose. And if you are not grounded, you will fracture under the weight of perception. That is why resilience is not optional. Resilience is structure. It is the internal architecture that allows you to bend without breaking when life applies force. Most people misunderstand resilience. They think it is toughness, but toughness alone is brittle. True resilience is adaptability. It is the ability to absorb impact, adjust, and continue moving without losing direction. A tree does not resist the wind by standing rigid. It survives by swaying, and yet its roots remain anchored. That is the paradox of strength. Flexibility on the surface, unshakable foundation beneath. And this is what life demands of you. You must learn to adapt without losing identity, because the world will shift constantly. Circumstances will change. Economies will rise and fall. People will come and go. Plans will collapse unexpectedly. Opportunities will appear in unfamiliar forms. And those who cling too tightly to one rigid version of success will break when reality refuses to comply. But those who stay anchored in principle rather than attachment will evolve. Principles do not change with conditions. Discipline, integrity, focus, responsibility, execution, truth, these are not seasonal traits. They are permanent foundations. And when you build your life on principles instead of moods, you become stable in unstable environments. That is rare, because most people are reactive. They act based on how they feel, not what they know. They start when they feel inspired. They stop when they feel tired. They delay when they feel uncertain. They abandon when they feel overwhelmed. And so their life becomes a reflection of emotional weather. But the disciplined individual breaks that cycle. They act based on commitment, not comfort. And commitment is a contract with the future self. It says, I will show up even when I do not feel like it. I will continue even when progress is invisible. I will persist even when doubt feels louder than confidence. And something remarkable happens when you live this way long enough. You begin to trust yourself, not because everything is easy, but because you have evidence that you do not quit on yourself anymore. Self-trust is the rarest currency in the world, because most people abandon themselves repeatedly. They break promises to themselves in small ways. I'll start tomorrow. I'll do it later. I'll be consistent next week. I'll change when things settle down. But life never settles down. Life moves, and the person who waits for perfect conditions becomes permanently delayed, whereas the person who moves regardless of conditions becomes powerful, because movement creates clarity. Not thinking, not waiting, not analyzing endlessly. Movement. Action reveals information that thought cannot access. You do not discover confidence by waiting to feel confident. You discover confidence by surviving what you thought would break you. Every action you take teaches your nervous system something new. I can survive this. I can handle this. I can improve this. I can adapt to this. And slowly, fear loses authority. Not because fear disappears, but because fear stops being believed. Fear is only powerful when it is obeyed. The moment you disobey fear and act anyway, fear begins to lose influence over your decisions. And that is freedom, not the absence of fear, but the ability to move despite it. And there is something else that begins to emerge in the disciplined life, something subtle but transformative. Clarity, because confusion is often not a lack of intelligence. It is a lack of movement. People overthink because they are not acting. They overanalyze because they are not building. They overconsume information because they are not producing anything. But once you begin executing consistently, something interesting happens. Noise fades. You start to see what matters. You start to feel what aligns. You start to recognize what is unnecessary. Clarity is not found in thought. Clarity is revealed in motion. And once clarity arrives, decision-making becomes simpler. You no longer debate every possibility endlessly. You begin to sense direction, and that sense becomes stronger the more you act. This is how intuition is built, not mystically, but through repetition, feedback, correction, and refinement. You try, you fail, you adjust, you improve, you try again, and over time your perception sharpens like a blade, and the world begins to respond differently to you because you are no longer uncertain in your movement. And certainty changes everything. Not arrogant certainty, but grounded certainty, the kind that says, I may not know every step, but I know I will figure it out. That mindset alone separates builders from spectators. But there is another truth the few understand that the many overlook. Gratitude is not the end of ambition. It is the fuel of it. Most people think gratitude means acceptance of limitation. But real gratitude expands capacity. Because when you are grateful for what you already have, you stop operating from desperation. And desperation clouds judgment. It causes people to rush decisions, to chase validation, to cling to things that are not aligned, to overvalue temporary gains. But gratitude stabilizes the mind. It creates emotional grounding. And from that grounding, you can build without distortion. You are no longer trying to escape your life. You are trying to elevate it. That difference changes everything. Because people who operate from lack build from fear, and fear-based creation eventually collapses. But people who operate from gratitude build from abundance, and abundance-based creation expands. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means your perception becomes stronger than difficulty. And perception determines experience. Two people can live identical circumstances and experience entirely different realities based on interpretation. One sees limitation everywhere. The other sees possibility everywhere. One sees closed doors. The other sees hidden entrances. One sees delay. The other sees preparation. And preparation is often disguised as delay. That is one of life's most misunderstood truths. What feels like waiting is often alignment forming behind the scenes, but only those who continue moving while waiting for clarity ever discover that truth. Because momentum attracts insight, and insight rewards action, and action rewards discipline, and discipline rewards identity, and identity shapes destiny. Everything is connected. Nothing stands alone. And once you see that pattern, you begin to understand something powerful. You are not stuck. You are being shaped. And shaping requires time, but time only becomes meaningful when it is used intentionally. Otherwise, it becomes erosion. Days do not just pass. They accumulate. Every day is either strengthening your future or weakening it. There is no neutral ground. And that realization is uncomfortable at first because it removes excuses, but it also removes limitations. Because if time is always active, then so are you. You are always becoming something, even in inaction, especially in inaction. So the question is never whether change is happening. The question is what direction it is happening in. And once a person becomes conscious of this, they can no longer live unconsciously. They begin to take responsibility for their minutes, not just their goals, because goals are distant. Minutes are immediate, and greatness is built in minutes, not milestones. One focused hour can shift an entire trajectory. One disciplined day can reset momentum. One courageous decision can alter direction. But it all begins with awareness. Awareness that your life is not waiting for permission. It is responding to participation. And participation is now, not later, not eventually. Now, because the present moment is the only point where power exists. The past is memory. The future is imagination. But the present is action. And action is where transformation lives. So when everything feels uncertain, when the path feels unclear, when progress feels slow, when doubt whispers loudly, return to action. Not frantic action, focused action. Even the smallest aligned step taken consistently carries more power than grand intention without execution. Because life does not reward intention. It rewards embodiment. And embodiment is repetition. The repetition of discipline. The repetition of focus. The repetition of courage. The repetition of choosing what matters over what distracts. And slowly, almost invisibly, a new identity forms. Not the person who hopes, but the person who builds. Not the person who wishes, but the person who executes. Not the person who waits, but the person who moves. And once that identity takes root, everything else begins to reorganize around it. Circumstances shift. Opportunities align. People respond differently. And results begin to reflect the internal change that already occurred long before the world noticed. Because the world always catches up late. But identity leads first. And that is where everything begins to change.